move on quickly to our next panel discussion. The topic for this session is Industry 4.0 in financial sector, the impact of AI, RPA and machine learning on digital financial inclusion. Our moderator for this session is Mr. Abhijit Ray, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, UC Inclusive Credit. Can we please put our hands together and welcome him up on stage? And our speakers now, Mr. Christopher Fernandez, Vice President, Enterprise Applications, HDFC Life Insurance. Mr. Rishikant Shastri, Vice President, IT, State Bank of India. Mr. Nikhil Bandi, Chief Technology, Digital and Operations Officer, APAC Financial Services Private Limited. Once again, Mr. Samit Shetty, Data, AI and Automation Leader, West Region, IBM, India, South Asia. Thank you, ma'am, for being so incredible. You two are my favorite audience member right now. And of course, Mr. Vamsi Yaluri, Chief Executive Officer, Nosem AI. Also, Mr. Vinod Kumar, Chief Information Officer and EVP, Fino Payments Bank. And now, before they start, please, everybody, please clap for them. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Abhijit.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we are running really late, so we don't want to hold you for lunch for long, so I try to finish it as early as possible. Organizers have already given us a limit. I think the clock has already started. So I'm actually in front of an amazing panel of people. I think as much I want, I can go ahead and learn from them, but I think the time given is only 45 minutes, and I will try to do justice to that. When you have a panel which comprises of amazing people, like one side we have Samit from IBM, I mean, a big, I would say behemoth, which has done everything in IT you can think of. And then coming from SBI, we have a gentleman who is implementing IT there. And today morning I learned that there are very unusual, as you know probably in SBI, the CGM is in charge of a region, the local head office. But I understand in the department, the IT department has at least 5 CGMs, I believe. So that's how large is the bank's IT system is. And we learned something from him as well. Now coming to a very interesting practitioner, we have Vamsi, who's been implementing AI, ML and whatnot in terms of trying to help this entire sector. We have Nikhil, who is a practitioner, coming back from US, from running IT companies. He's back here to practice what he probably was preaching earlier in 2 NBFCs. And I will ask him something about that. We have Christopher, completely different background, coming from technology from the US and working for the insurance enterprise solution, implementing things at the grassroots level in a very large scale. So we have a very interesting and different panel, and we have Vinod, who is also from a practitioner perspective, will share about Fino, what it is doing. So now the topic of digital, or I would say Industry 4.0 is all about building efficient systems and processes, using your data and helping you to take smart and intelligent decisions so that your business becomes much more efficient, profitable, and you can really grow faster. So with that in background, I think a lot of things we have seen over the past, I think from digital onboarding, which is a simple thing people say today, after Aadhaar has come into the picture, to e-sign, to e-NAS, and everything has become e now, right? So simple to do probably. Then if you look at, I think people like Vamsi and others have done a lot of work in terms of saying, what can we do from a chatbot to an intelligent chatbot, right? And now it has become voice-based chatbot. So a lot of interesting innovations are happening there. So now let's hear from people, because they are running different businesses. They bring a lot of interesting insight. So I would rather first start with Vamsi, because he has seen two very large NBFCs. One side he was in Vistar for long. Now he has joined a slightly different NBFC called APAC, relatively new. Uh, yeah, so relatively new in this lending, and we would like to know from him, because he, I don't know, you know, he has been a very amazing roller hockey player. Uh, I know this sport is not so popular in India, but he was a very good player, and he also played ice hockey. So I want to know from him that how difficult is for large institutions like the institutions he has worked for. Um, is it so simple to think of this transformation? Is it a roller, skater like simple approach? What you, when you do used to play? Please let us know.
Thank you. Thanks for an introduction. A little different introduction than what generally we see. We only see the professional life, but I think it took me back to the days where I used to be a sports lover and then moved into a life of a technologist, even if it was out of country or in India. I would say after the three industrial revolutions, when we say Industry 4.0, the biggest transformation is transforming fast, or the agility which we are seeing here. So the topic is so widespread, the horizontal is so wide. The good part is that there was a context given that it is online of AI, where we need to see the information which is contextual. It also talks about the robotic process automation. It means the speed has to be high, and the redundant processes should be, or mundane processes should be all automated. And a machine learning, it means that the decision which we are making are not only just fast, but are data driven and accurate. While I've worked in technology for now more than 2 decades in the industry, moved into NBFC space a little less than a decade back, so 6-7 years back. What I found different, so in a lending space, when we think of, there are few things which are fundamental. Whom should we lend? How much should we lend? It also talks about, will this person repay or will he not repay? When should I go for taking my collections from this person? Is this, what is going to be the propensity of a new lead to be getting converted as a customer? What is going to be propensity of a default for a particular customer who's onboarded with us? So these are the set of fundamental questions which are asked, but because of the Industry 4.0 or the technology transformations which we have seen over this period of time, I think during my current avatar or the previous experiences I had, we could see this journey and journey very contextual, that the kind of technologies which are being available with us today. When I see that, okay, whom should I lend to? Whom should I lend to comes with what is the target segment. Then I would say that target segment is identified. We will have a social footprint of people. We will be able to identify that these are the set of prospects which we need to approach. How much we should lend, it is determined. Today we have the technology available. Initial feed was bureau, so fintechs are available to get the bureau score. Then there were account aggregator implementations which have happened, which also gives the bank statement analysis as to how we will be able to get. Now then, the next one was propensity of a customer to pay in terms of their current social footprint, the social data, the surrogate data which we get from a customer. So these are the things which all brought in the element of not just the element of machine learning, which was exploited and used during this transformation. The more important thing, because the machine learning algorithms are becoming mature and mature enough, I think what's going to be more important now is the contextual business process flow in terms of the customer experience. A customer who would want today to get a loan from an NBFC. Uh, if you just go 10 years back, this person would just go and ask his neighbor, which is the nearby bank from where I can get a loan for, let's say, loan against property for expanding my business. But today, everything is on his fingertips. The expectation from institutions like ours is that wherever this person, see if he is going to do a search on his browser, he should get a result which is favorable to him and favorable to the organization which he is going to be approaching. If a housing loan company is shown in his search result when he is looking at a business loan, it's a waste of time for the customer as well as the housing loan company. So customer experience and how the contextual the search is also going to be as important. So I would say all the three topics are such that once you go in deeper in all the three areas, it would take a little more time, but all of them together, they do, I can consider three of them together really converge towards Industry 4.0.
Forgive me for interrupting, sir. I'm very sorry. We have one more panelist who will be joining us in this session. Mr. Varundeep Kaur, CIO, Spice Money. I would request Miss Varundeep Kaur. I'm so sorry. Miss Varundeep Kaur, CIO, Spice Money, would be joining us for this session. Please let us put our hands together.
Chair. Welcome, madam. Sorry, I was not aware earlier. Thanks for joining us. I hope you will, it will make it much more interesting. So one of the things we try to push in a panel, and today I'm so happy it's happening. We generally, both Eric and I, try to push it that there should be at least one woman panel member, because we have become so much men-driven. That's not also right inclusive approach when you are talking of digital and financial inclusion. So good to see, ma'am, you are here. Thank you for joining the panel. And thanks, organizers. So I think coming to the next point of discussion, and please keep your first thoughts limited to three minutes. It will help us to be much more efficient. Now, moving to Christopher, I think, Christopher is doing a slightly different part. He is doing enterprise, application, actually trying to see how financial inclusion can happen both in rural and urban, where a different type of customers are there. The field operation is slightly different. Even the people who are doing the sales there are quite different, probably in urban to peri-urban to rural setup. And Christopher has also worked in the US, seen a lot of things there, and coming back to India and trying to implement this in a very large scale from HFC Life's perspective. He being a musician and also he being a poet, how poetic and how symphonic can he see this implementation happening, in the context of all these things taken together in a large scale? So.
Yeah. So I was just listening to the gentleman talk about how things converge. I think what's interesting about the India market is, there's a huge divide between urban and rural. And when you talk about financial services, whether it is banks or insurance companies, while all the focus is on our urban sales, there's a huge underserviced rural population. What as carriers we've discovered is that we assume that a lot of our revenue channels are from urban customers, but the reality is that there is a rural segment which both from a volumes and a value perspective is hugely untapped. I mean, you would be surprised when you go to certain rural segments within Maharashtra or some of the other larger states. You have these very affluent farmers who are potential customers for us today, and you cannot service them with your typical digital channel, right? They will have the best of phones and they will have the best of cars, but they are still old school when it comes to filling an insurance form, right? So on one side you have this urban segment which you are trying to service with the best toys in the market, which are driven by all these beautiful underlying enabling technologies, and you have this large under-tapped segment which still wants to go paper, which still wants to do a wet signature, to who e-natch doesn't make sense and they would still like to give you a check or give you cash. So we still have, a hybrid model out there. And the reality is, if you look at the mix, uh, urban only constitutes for 30% of or 40% of the volumes game. We still have a 60 to 70% rural untapped market, which most carriers are focusing on. So from our perspective, while we have a clear focus on the tech-enabled, um, the shiny objects, if I may use the term loosely, there is equal attention given to some of those hybrid models where we are still looking to digitize paper apps. We are still looking to service offline modes because we do have a foot force that is, servicing remote areas where you don't have electricity, you don't have the internet. So they are probably walking to some of these customers with handheld devices where you still have apps that will guide them and help them collect the data, but they will have to come back to a field office to sync information. So that is just the reality of the India market, which makes it very interesting. And I don't think this is an insurance only problem. I think this is equally important to banks. And today you have the postal service kind of stepping in as well, trying to play a pseudo bank. Interestingly, that's another channel which a lot of the carriers are focusing on. So there is digital, but there is a hybrid digital that needs to be addressed. And I think from a tech perspective, um, while a lot has been said on 4.0, I think there is something like a 3.5 and a 4.0 that exists, which nobody wants to talk about. I think what would be interesting is to hear the rest of the panel talk about it, because both in banking, even on the lending side, I think that's a hugely untapped market, right? Um, After we are done with all the urban clients, what happens to the underserviced, privileged rural clients? I mean, there is money to be made there as well. So I would be curious to hear the other panelists talk about it and focus on that, because I'm sure everyone has heard a lot about RPA, AI, ML, but nobody seems to be talking about that that gray area which exists and is a potential revenue stream.
No, thank you. That's a very interesting thought. And I think time and again it is coming out that in the previous panels also and since morning, people are saying that, and even one gentleman did talk about Harivanshji's poem as well. At the end of the day, it's the customer. At the end of the day, it's the user. At the end of the day, you will make money if your user, your customer is happy with your product and services. So everything actually centered around that. Sometimes the process of building all these all this technology and using tremendous amount of jargon to that, we forget that our business lies there. And if you don't care about the end client, probably everything may fall apart. So I think, Christopher, what you are saying is at the end of the day, there should be a symphony, where in a symphony of multiple people there, you cannot go alone thinking that you are the one who will conquer the world and do everything. You have to see what are the other stakeholders there, how they can play a part in this entire process. Now, moving to SBI, we have Rushikant, and as I was saying, Rushikant is part of a massive team which leads all this. Rushikant, looking at the size of the bank, more than 10,000 branches across India, and I think
25,000.
Sorry, 25. Oh yeah, with all the acquisitions. Sorry, that was the time in 1993 when I was there in SBI. So sorry, forgot that. So I think the way it's moving, and I think SBI is the forefront of financial inclusion, and that to digital inclusion. How, as an individual who enjoys swimming, how is the process in SBI? Is the swimming easy, tough, rough weather? How is it?
So yeah, I guess that was the topic of the day. Use of AI, AML, and some blockchain and RPA for financial inclusion. Little contradict when I gone through the topic, but still, as I guess first speaker have touched base upon financial inclusion. So evaluation of financial inclusion started with, I guess, no frill accounts, sir might be aware, basic accounts, small saving accounts, small deposit accounts. Then eventually it has started with your famous Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan, Atal Pension, Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti. Last but not the least, UPI, APS, USSD. So what we have witnessed in these three stages of inclusion is like, this is a combination of people, process, technology. Wherever for smalls account of no frilly cost technology was involved, I don't think, little bit. No AI, no ML, it's people driven. When I say people, it's banks, regulators. Process, of course, the regulators decided the process that with minimum KYC, you have to onboard the customer. Technology came in the last stage when it comes to APIs of the world and UPIs and EAPs of the world. So this was what we have witnessed. So drivers over here is like regulators, banks, and PSPs. Over here, hurdle was, now just take the example of PSP, most of the investments were from, or infrastructure was built up by traditional players. PSP in that case, my NBFCs also, they were little lucky to ride on the infrastructure which was already set, which was already invested. So that's the number one point which have to cater large organization, that how to make best use of existing infra. Number two, if you have to certain, because what I feel in the year 2017, I guess 54%, 55% adults were having the banking facility. Today the figure, it's 84, 85%, humongous growth when it comes to adult. So tapping the customer who is still not having access to bank, few or rare. So there comes the opportunity. What you need to do is like retention, engagement, upsell, cross-sell. For that, what you need? 3 parameters. You need to have your process or your product smooth. PSP rided on the smoothness. Paytms, GPays of the world. They have such a beautiful streamlined interface, smooth interface. That's why they were able to penetrate. So smooth. Support. If I'm talking about the financial inclusion, that means there may be possibility I don't have end user which is tech savvy. So they may require support and I should be in a position to provide the support. Last but not the least, security. And that is the only point where we have the USP that we consider ourselves as most secure as compared to the others, small players. And that is the only USP I guess we should write. So these 3 A's will definitely help us to building upon the affordability, awareness, accuracy, and availability, which are the primary tool for financial inclusion. So that's what, considering the limitation of the time, I could have keep on going on and on. So that's what I feel 3 A's should be mapped to 4 A's with the help of latest available technology. That's my submission, sir.
Wonderful. What a simple way of putting it together. And that's why probably, SBI has been able to do things so simply. And I think I would say then you are really swimming very smoothly, even if it's a rough weather. Yeah, great. No, good to hear that. Now, next to move on to Vinod. Vinod is presently in Fino Payment Bank. And Vinod has been an entrepreneur himself, used to do strategic consulting on the IT and IT security part. And he was also in Iraq Bank, right, in Dubai. Earlier also he worked in Dhanlakshmi Bank. So coming from a banking background and then to a payment bank, which I think is not an easy business and where you have to do a lot of technology because the margins are very low. And many people don't know, he used to be a very, his passion was driving, and not only driving fast. He used to drive a lot, he used to participate in races. And I learned from him that during the COVID times, he had to go to Kochi and he drove at 190 kilometers an hour in Indian roads. Hats off. So I think, with speed and agility, and at the same time when you are running such a large implementation in Fino probably, how do you balance between the speed and also ensure that every aspect is taken care of when you're implementing large scale, very efficient programs of this type of digital inclusion?
Thank you for the great introduction. The speed is a mantra now, especially those who are aware of the payment bank industry, how it is working, and the kind of infrastructure and the kind of transactions throughput they are expected to give to the customers, and the speed is a fact there. So from Fino Payments Bank perspective, we primarily work, I'm just touching on the main three points what we are discussing today. One is on the AI level, ML and the RPA. So how to come up to the curve to meet the requirements of the customers, the partners, and how we can deliver the entire integration expectations, etc. We primarily go into the implementation at the transaction throughput level, how we can actually improve the transaction speed, the volume handling, and the customers, end customers satisfaction. So I'll touch three areas where actually we looked for improving the customer, the getting the customer into the banking system. So primarily we put a lot of AI and the BI part into the marketing side of it, the sales and marketing to identify the customers, how our customers is behaving. So as you mentioned, 80% of our customers are from Indian rural area. So how they are behaving, how they are transacting, how the transaction patterns are. And when we are actually making one advertisement, how those people, the 80%, 80 to 85% of the people in the interior or rural area of India, how they are taking their advertisement, is there any impact on that? On other part is how we can actually acquire more customers. No, the word of mouth doesn't work some of the areas. Some of the areas they need to see things actually physically. Actually, they don't believe some of the digital mechanism, digital parameters. So they need to see or they need to feel that how the bank is reliable and they can actually come and transact with this payments. And because they don't see any branch there. Our entire model is with the merchants. So what you can say, we had about 240 branches earlier. Now we limited only 54 branches across India. But bank is having almost a million plus merchants, direct partners, and the partners to the merchants to the partners. So these merchants are at the end, actually they are the touch points for us. So how we can actually build them, how they are behaving, how the merchants are behaving, their longevity with the bank, their genuine transaction, how they are doing. Now all those parameters we need to analyze. That become one of the ingredients for our marketing, how the marketing should be done, the sales should be done, how the sales people should approach the industry or the market to acquire more merchants, because the churn of the merchant is very high. The merchant today morning they will be doing the transaction with the Fino Payments Bank, maybe in the afternoon they will go to different competitor. So how we can actually hold this, and what are the parameters that we can give to them to stand with us. So the high level of artificial intelligence and ML, actually we put in the backend on the marketing side to ensure that we are able to handle the users, we are able to acquire the merchants, and the sustainability can be done there. The second part, the major area where we have applied the same, we implemented very strongly is on the risk management side. So what we found, everybody is aware of the kind of fraud that is actually happening in India. So we identify how the frauds are happening. And it's very important for, especially in a payments bank, and she'll be knowing more than me. If there's a fraud, if there's a bug in the system or a process gap, anything, the weight is actually spreading across merchant. It doesn't take more than 1 minute. If there's one way you can do, or you can actually one fraud can, it may be a fraud or maybe a process gap. Within 1 minute time, across India, the transaction fraud happens. Or what are the type of fraud that can happen, that happens. So we do a lot of analysis at the back end. One is the normal FRM, the fraud risk management rules which is running. But behind that, we do a lot of AI and ML to identify how the pattern is getting changed. You may not believe the people are actually, the transaction happen at the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. kind of time from the merchant somewhere in Bihar or maybe somewhere in interior of India or northeastern area, how the transactions are happening. The moment there's a fraud happens, within minute, the number of transactions will be pumping. So we do that analysis at any point of time. 24/7, the systems are actually looking into the patterns, and the ML and AI applied there, and wherever the fraud can be controlled, I'll not say we can actually stop it. Fraud can be controlled, that we do. And third thing, today we are actually applying the same thing, AI and ML part on the security side of it, the cyber security, because that is another main area where we need to ensure that the bank is protected, the customers are protected, and the system can work. As I mentioned, the people, process, and the security system, the technology. How we can actually have a sustained technology which can provide 24/7 support to the customers. A lot of analysis actually happening at the patterns of attacks that is happening at any point of time, the people 24/7 monitoring. We put a lot of systems on a RPA, on the IT side itself. So no, mostly we automate the business side. We implement a lot of robotic process in IT side to do the mundane activities of database management, the cron jobs and other stuff. The many things actually we put there. So the industry is changing from where we can do a lot of manual work and identify the normal rules and signatures, that can give the support. But industry is moving, we are also moving much ahead. The main three areas which can bring the organization to a sustainable mode, the marketing and sales, which will bring the revenue, fraud, which can actually control the other internal part of it, and IT, which is the backbone for the organization, where it can be secured to the users and customers and for internal tips.
Thank you, Vinod. I think one of the things Vinod highlighted is everything centered around the end customer. For him, is the end customer is the kirana shop or right? And I think this is one thing I want to highlight as an investment banker. All my life, I've seen that, nowadays investors are very particular to see who's your client. Is it the client they can associate with you? I mean, is it unique to you? And the value proposition should be all around the client. It's so important. So even for the startups, if there are some here, please keep that always in mind, that the investor is always interested to see, is there a unique client? Is they getting a benefit which they think they will not get from anybody else? Are you thinking about them and building the product and services around that? It's very, very important and critical for success of any institution. Now, coming to, I think Vamsi. Vamsi, you have been an entrepreneur for the last so many years, and very interesting things you are building there. Using smart bots and other things. Now, how do you see the landscape in the last few years, especially for small to medium enterprise? I'm not talking of large ones where you are implementing them. What are the challenges you see, and how the entrepreneurs are reacting to it in terms of the implementation? Because it's not easy to change all of a sudden moving into those directions. So some examples on that would be very, very helpful, and where they adopted and the results were very, very visible very quickly.
Thanks for the opportunity, firstly. So I think there are a lot of things to consider here, but probably we'll kind of narrow it down to few aspects from a financial inclusion and the digital inclusion, right? So you're kind of focused on SME part and SMB part and small to medium. So large is always there, to cater to the large. There are large players, vendors out there, and that can be kind of satisfied. But when it comes to smaller organizations, especially when we look at how they work and what is the way they want to be part of the financial systems and all. So that has always been a challenge, but if I have to look at the way it is happening. So I come from a very digital background, right? So my core essential job is the communication cloud. Now, there are a lot of things, proliferation of digital. The mediums are internet and mobile, definitely. Keeping that in mind, and with the advent of new instruments, right? It can be the traditional side of the banking, and now the payments banks and the neobanks which are coming up, right? So I think these new instruments are definitely taking the inclusion for the small SMBs or the medium companies. At the same time, the rural side of it. I heard that this 60% is untapped, which was kind of, and that's gonna change. The landscape is gonna change, and obviously the AI, ML. So these are enablers. So IT itself is an enabler, but obviously enabler is a word which is it'll become very insignificant these days, because IT is the backbone. It is the primary aspect for everyone. So if I have to look at inclusion or the challenges, right? They're multifold. In fact, when you look at the challenges today, the segments which we are talking about, be it the rural or the SMBs and all, we look at where there needs to be a lot of education which needs to be imparted on how they have to use the systems. What is the best way to kind of leverage a particular digital channel? So let's say, for example, I'll take a very simple example of where every one of us is using, that is WhatsApp. So WhatsApp, when it was kind of launched, it is just a peer-to-peer messenger. But these days, WhatsApp has become one of the major business channels to drive not just the communications, but the transactions. So every bank here, all the eminent dignitaries who are there here, right, they've experienced it and they're using it, and we're all experiencing on a daily basis, right? So if you look at WhatsApp, and we talk about digital inclusion is not happening on the rural side or on the SMB side, to an extent, it is not the right way, because people out there are doing TikTok videos, YouTubes, and posting everywhere, even people who don't know how to use them. And WhatsApp has made even more easy the life of people to kind of have this on their hand. So yes, probably to an extent it is difficult to use sometimes mobile apps of different banks, which I myself have faced such kind of difficulties, but it is so easy to use WhatsApp, right? The challenge is what are, so say for example, if I kind of medium company or a very small company, how do you kind of channelize this to be used across your organization? Because there are too many ifs and buts, and there are too many compliances which sit with respect to banking, which is now at least open, and the other digital channels are also coming up, right? Even there are Facebook messengers which are exclusively used from the pages of the companies and all. But this is gonna kind of be a bottleneck unless there is some kind of a compliance ease which we look at, right? There are if you look at RBI or IRDA, there are only certain things which can be done from these mediums or digital channels. You can't do everything and anything which you do from your proprietary asset like your mobile app or your website. So inclusion can come when you kind of open up or ease out on certain restrictions. But obviously, I completely understand there are a ton of challenges which we cannot just go ahead and say that, yes, we will do everything for you. And for large enterprises, I think it is very well managed, because there are teams or there are dedicated channels which can be done that. Okay, through them, it is possible. Even banks go and sit there and open up a shop, and they say that, hey, we are here to serve you. But that doesn't happen with a small or a medium kind of a company or an enterprise, right? So if we have to look at how do we overcome these challenges, I would always say that there should be some sort of a framework which has to come out, where digital inclusion will come through to ensure that there is a financial inclusion with ease of certain compliances. I'm not saying we need to compromise on anything, but at least from a security standpoint, we'll always be secure enough, we'll always be kind of compliant with the laws of lands and all. But to make sure that it has to happen, there should be some ease of compliances which need to come with a regulated framework. So that's something which will help not just the SMBs, but everybody, even the individual users, to kind of freely use what they have and how they can kind of leverage further on this digital and financial inclusion. So that's my thought.
A valid point. I think one of the learnings for all of us is that we're very clear what can be done in a simple manner vis-a-vis what cannot be done, and try to make it much more simpler, ease of implementation. Now coming to Samit, I mean, I've been waiting to hear from you. And Samit, you have seen the global perspective. You have seen the Indian perspective. You work with very large institutions like the SBIs and others probably, and the IDBIs and whatnot. Now the interesting, being a cricket player yourself, wherein you played a T20 and a one day and also a test match, it's a very unique option of saying, hey, do you go whole hog and try to win the game? Do you play it, change your strategy in between? So I think this implementation of all this, keeping the customer at the point of, at the center, and when you're doing it at a very large scale, how do you play the game? I mean, what are the learnings out of it, more importantly?
Yes, so I was interesting to hear all the perspective right from the panelist, and as Ashton and we were discussing, let me throw a different perspective to this whole financial inclusion piece, right? In terms of how do we see it, and I think sometimes as we Indians, we undermine a lot of our capabilities as Indians, right? And to a lot of extent, a lot of technologies and innovations has germinated from India, which the West has learned, right? So when we say that our rural India doesn't know how to use technology, I would probably differ to that thought process, right? It's more because we have, from an inclusion standpoint, we have built a technology for the urban world, and we have said, okay, now this is, we are giving to the rural world, and we need to educate them how to use it. But if I have to flip the coin and say, see at other industries, right? The per second billing actually transformed the whole telecom industry, and a new stream of businesses started coming out, right? And we actually gave a lot of learning over there. UPI became so much popular because the adoption happened at the grocery stores. They started using the UPI, and that's how the adoption increased so much, right? So I think it's the time for the banking industry of fraternity has come in terms into put the rural first and see, how can I build a product for the rural India, right? Rather than saying, okay, I've built a product for the urban masses, and now how can the rural adopt it? Can you switch the game and say, what can I bring to the rural India? How can I use this technology platform to make the rural India get more inclusive into it? And I have no doubt in my mind saying that once you have that in place, the thing that we mentioned in yesterday as well, the class for the mass. When you bring the class for the mass, it's bound to be successful, right? So that's one of the point that I would like to bring onto that. I mean, financial inclusion through AI, ML, RPA, etc. is all possible. Only thing is our point of view has to change, rather than building something and force fitting onto the rural, trying to see how I can build something for the rural and keep them at the forefront. That's what I would think about it.
A very interesting thought, Samit. Coming from IBM, I mean, looking at the grassroots and trying to change this is not easy, but I think you guys are thinking on this line itself is a big step for the banks to think differently.
No, I think, sorry, just to intrude, but I think it is not just from the technology companies, because the technology companies, we kind of serve the purpose where the purposes has to be kind of put forward by the organizations.
Absolutely.
So only then I think it is something meaningful for a tech company like us or IBM or whichever it is, can kind of develop something for that particular vision. If it is not there, it doesn't really help anybody, right? So you're leaving off the rural side, and without a point focus, you cannot definitely drive towards that. So it has to definitely come from the other panelists who are sitting here, and they have to drive that inclusion, and keeping in mind the rural, which is the major catering system, right? So that has to go through that way.
Right, Vamsi, thanks for reinforcing that point. I think coming to Varundeep ma'am, I know she is from Spice Money. She's the Chief Information Officer. And I think she also this year got the Eminent CIO award in 2022. I just quickly saw the LinkedIn. Sorry, ma'am, I didn't get time to look up about you a bit. But would really now the debate is more, or I would say the view is very clear. It is the mass market. We can't assume that they don't know. They know. It's a question of, are we adapting ourselves to that situation, right? If somebody doesn't have a phone like Android, can we do through a feature phone? We have to adapt, right? And see, they can do it very well, right? We have seen this in the past. So, ma'am, looking at your experience with Spice Money, how do you see the success there? What type of additional, I would say, ingredient in your spice you add to make it much more successful in your journey there?
Right. So, thank you very much for an interesting question. So, I will first brief about Spice Money and what part of rural India we cover. So, Spice Money is one of the leading rural fintechs, and we cover banking and payments, a bit of offline to online e-commerce, lending, credit, and then agri-tech and travel. So what we captured, and I would say pandemic is considered as a boon because it has really pushed these technologies, what we call RPA, AI, ML here. What we are following is an approach which is called design thinking, where earlier what we used to do, like Samit also mentioned, that we create some product and we try to force fit it for the rural market. So what we understood that whatever product we are creating, whatever service we are creating for our rural segment, we showcase to them, we take their inputs, and we try understand whether they agree with that process or not. So that is a design time validation that happens. And in terms of coverage, if we see, so from 3 lakh adhikaris to 10 lakh adhikaris over period of 2 years, and we are covering 18,000 pin codes out of 19,000 pin codes, 700 districts out of 750 districts. So this, and through a phygital model, like we have mobile application, we have web application, but we have merchant models where merchants serve our customers. We are not directly serving our customers. So the part is that means the technology enablers for us is going to be the merchants. If they are able to understand how the product and service works, it is much more easier. And coming on to statistics, when we talk about, I would say thanks to pandemic, it really pushed the financial inclusion. Now we, in March 22 statistics of RBI, it says that we are at 56.4% while we were 53.9% the last year. And during the same duration. And if you see the 29% of rural people, they post one content on social media every day. And the other reports also mention that in terms of smartphone penetration and in terms of internet penetration, the statistics are now above 67%. So in terms of rural segment, what is important that they are adopting technology. Like if they have to buy a product from Amazon or Flipkart, even if they want to buy it through a phygital model, they will come prepared with the statistics. On Amazon, I am getting it at this price, and Flipkart, I am getting it on this price. If you have to book for travel, right? So because what happens, what we need to also understand, that rural people are there, but there are many young people who are working in urban cities, they have their parents back home, right? Who want to, and they want to book tickets for them. So what is easier? They might have told that, okay, on this particular website, this travel ticket costs this much, and on this here, you go and get the ticket booked. So from that perspective, it is that the adoption is really coming in. And also what I believe is the inclusion from the female side is also coming up with our CSR initiative that we had at the Women's Day, is that we gave a free financial awareness to the female partners of the merchants, so that they also become included, they also can help their spouses, and they can also become aware. And that is where what we see, the more female inclusion will happen in the financial segment, the more rapidly it will grow. And secondly, what we see, if I talk about the technologies, I would say it was just time right. When the pandemic just started, we had launched our WhatsApp bot support. Earlier, we were very skeptical whether it will like flow or not. But during that pandemic, it worked really well. And in terms of, if I will quickly summarize, in terms of RPA, we automated the entire reconciliation process, where my 10 revenue assurance guys used to wake up at 5 a.m., work across the entire weekend, and then we were just waiting for customers to complain that my refund has not come. So trust in rural segment is extremely important. It is important everywhere, but it is the right time at the right juncture. Other thing, the last point which I want to make is that the fraud perspective or the security perspective is also very important. If a rural customer will get or have one fraud, so probably he will not use your technology. So it is very important that you build all the technology, people, process, and technology on the basis of design, data, security, and experience is what it matters. It is not important that you have missed out something. It is important that you have course corrected immediately. So that is what these technologies are going to help us with.
Thank you, ma'am. This is a very important and interesting point you said. You know, we also saw in microfinance over the years that women at the core of development makes life completely different, because they are concerned much more about family, they are concerned about saving, they are concerned about business. So I think that's a very interesting point. Second point which came out very clearly in terms of summary is that let it be nimble, simple, you know, don't try to overdo it. It's more important you understand the nuances, you know, understand the need and do it and implement. I think, you know, with that, I would like to end, because we have already crossed the 45-minute session. If there's any questions, very happy to address, or we can do it over the lunch. What do you think, organizers?
Sir, we'll request any questions that are there to be taken offline in the
Okay.
interest of time.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, all the panelists. It has been wonderful hearing from you. I learned a lot today, and I hope the members here or who have all joined would have learned also a lot. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists. I would request Dr. Ravi Gupta to please come up on stage and present the newest edition of the Banking and Finance Post magazine to all of our esteemed panelists. Now I would request Ravi sir to please present a memento. First to Mr. Vinod Kumar, Chief Information Officer and EVP, Fino Payments Bank. Next to Mr. Christopher Fernandez, Vice President Enterprise Applications, HDFC Life Insurance. To Mr. Rushikant Shastri, Vice President IT, State Bank of India. To Mr. Nikhil Bandi, Chief Technology, Digital and Operations Officer, APAC Financial Services Private Limited. To Mr. Samit Shetty, Data, AI and Automation Leader, West Region, IBM India, South Asia. Yeah, and to Mr. Vamsi Yeluri, Chief Executive Officer, NOSEM AI. Ms. Varundeep Kaur, CIO Spice Money. Are we done? There was like please put your hands together for all of our speakers.